Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. All students of the Quran generally are informed of the fact that the first revelation from the Almighty to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Surah Alaq, or the words of Surah Alaq that we are so familiar with, Iqra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq, which mean that read in the name of thy Lord who created you. Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi actually has criticized this interpretation, has criticized this Shan Nuzul or occasion of revelation, and has said that as far as Surah Alaq is concerned, it is very significant to note that its own contents, its own subject matter thoroughly denies this notion. This Surah Alaq is actually a surah in which the Quraysh, they are reprimanded. Anger and wrath is poured upon them from the Almighty, and the way the Almighty speaks to them in this surah in a very hard and a very harsh manner, it hardly merits to be the first revelation. First revelation ought to be something which is soft, which is gentle, which is more argumentative in style, it has more reasoning behind it. However, as far as Surah Alaq is concerned, its internal structure is such, its own subject matter is such that it has very harsh words for people who have a certain behavior towards the Prophet and who are actually denying. And hence it does not merit to be the first revelation. Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi has actually said that the first revelation, according to most Mufassirun, and he is actually cited Zamakhshari, who is the author of the famous commentary Al-Kashaf, that Surah Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the whole surah is the first revelation from the Almighty to the Prophet Muhammad. Whether it is or not, we shall inshallah deal with it at some other time. But today I wanted to explain to you that Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi has vehemently denied the fact that Surah Iqra cannot be regarded as the first revelation from the Almighty to the Prophet Muhammad because of its own contents, its own harshness, its own strict style, which is not at all appropriate for to regard it as the first revelation. I'm just going to read out the surah before you. The translation, of course, is an actual translation is in Urdu, but my own translation of that Urdu translation into English will give you some idea of the harshness and of the strict nature of the style of this surah, which, according to Ustaz Islahi, does not at all make it appropriate to regard it as a first revelation. So, a translation of Surah Iqra, which is Iqra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, Iqra wa rabbukal akram allazi allama bil qalam. So, these are the first five verses, and allama al insana ma lam ya'lam is the first five verses, and then, of course, the surah goes on. So, here is a very simple translation of the surah, and it will tell you that the contents of this surah do not make it a very plausible surah as the first revelation. So the words are, read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot of congealed blood. Read, and your Lord is the most bounteous, who taught by the pen. He taught man what he knew not. Certainly not. Indeed, man is being rebellious, considering himself to be self-sufficient. Indeed, to his Lord is the return. Just look at him who forbids a servant when he prays. Just consider if this person is rightly guided or urges others to virtue. Just see if this person denied and turned away. Does he not know that Allah is observing? Certainly not. If he does not desist, we shall drag him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. Then let him call his faction. We shall summon our guards. Certainly not. Do not obey him, and bow down in prostration and draw near. So these are the words of Surah Alaq, which Ustaz says that they are certainly not very appropriate to regard them as the first revelation. And he has also said that most of the scholars think that actually the first five verses of Surah Alaq form the first revelation. The next verses, which are verses 6 to 19, they were revealed as a later installment sometime later on. Ustaz says that this is also not feasible, and he also cites that this second opinion, or this opinion, which is the primary opinion in this regard, is the one which is based on a hadith which is cited in Bukhari and Muslim. He says that this also cannot be regarded as plausible because the first five verses of the surah are so intricately woven with the next part of the surah that there is absolutely no concomitant indication that the surah was actually revealed in two installments. And just to understand this point, we can clearly see that the sixth verse, which of course generally is thought to be as the second installment, from which the second installment begins, look how itself begins. It says, "Certainly not. Indeed, man is being rebellious, considering himself to be self-sufficient." Now, the Arabic words are "Kalla innal insana la yatgha." Certainly not. Indeed, man is being rebellious. Now, this is something which is again not appropriate, because you see, to begin wahi, to begin an installment by the words "Kalla," which means certainly not, it is not appropriate at all. So there has to be something before that, which the "Kalla," which means certainly not, which it actually denies. When it starts off with "Kalla," you immediately wonder that what is it that this particle of negation is denying, and hence this is a very strong indication that the sixth verse is so closely knitted to the fifth one and to the rest of the surah that it cannot be regarded in isolation. And the bottom line that needs to be understood is that Ustaz Islahi says that the temperament of the surah, the temper of the surah, the harsh temperament, the temper of the surah, and the words which are used, look what it says, that certainly if he does not desist, we shall drag him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. These are not appropriate to be regarded as the surah. And even if the first 5 verses are taken, even they have that ring of harshness in them. And it is said that, "Read, and your Lord is the most bounteous, who taught by the pen. He taught man what he knew not." So again, that ring is there. And as more importantly, we have to understand that these first 5 verses, even if they are thought to be the first revelation, they cannot be taken into isolation from the next, because of the fact that the 6th verse actually begins by the particle "Kalla," which means certainly not, and this has a ring in it. It has a very certain and an obvious ring in it, that it is negating something which has already been stated earlier, and therefore it becomes a very inappropriate first word for a new installment of a surah. So these are some of the points which I wanted to discuss with you and raise before you. You can of course pick up the commentary yourself and read it through. And the most important thing that we have to note is that as far as the Shan Nuzul, or the occasion of revelation of a surah, is concerned, Ustaz Islahi stresses that it has to be gauged from the contents and the subject matter of the surah. It cannot be gauged from outside it. Of course, if there are narratives which tell what the occasion of revelation was, then they have to support the contents of the surah. It is the contents of the surah which will reign supreme, which will prevail as far as deciding what was the occasion of revelation. Every external thing from the Quran can only stand in support of it, and if it stands at variance with it, then it shall not be accepted, as is the case here, that Ustaz makes his point that Surah Iqra is not important, is not appropriate at all. And perhaps because of the first verse which says, "Iqra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq," read in the name of thy Lord who created, it is so appropriate to be regarded as the first surah. But again, it's not a single verse which has been revealed, as people have said. Either they were the first five verses or the whole surah itself. And it seems that just the linkage or connection or the appropriate nature of only the first verse maybe brought this in mind, that this was the first verse that or the first wahi that was revealed. But as I said, that because of the fact that it is part of a surah, and the whole surah has a very harsh import towards the mushrikun, that it cannot be regarded as the first surah. So please do reflect on this, keep thinking, and inshallah I'll be back with some more research from Ustaz Amin Ahsan Islahi. Until next time, it is Khuda Hafiz. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات.